Hi everyone, this is Mindy Egan for My Favorite Things, and today we are going to make an infinity shaker. Infinity shakers are where the shaker card is the entire front of the card. Now, there are some specialty projects on the market right now to quickly create these, but I'm going to do it with some leftover packaging from my stamp sets. I'm going to start by creating my background, and to do this, I am using the Rolling Clouds stencil and some 80-pound white cardstock. I'm going to use my Make Art Station to hold my stencil down over my cardstock, but you could certainly do this with Post-it tape as well. I'm starting with Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide ink and a blending tool, starting at the very top, and I'm going to blend from the stencil up onto the cardstock. Then all I need to do is remove my magnets, turn my stencil in any direction, hold the stencil down with my magnets once again, and then repeat those same steps. What I really love about these kind of cloud stencils is you can turn them in any direction. You can even flip it over and then rotate them again to get all these different shaped rolling clouds for your backgrounds. I'm going to continue working my way down my card front. This is cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so an A2 size card panel. And for the color, you could really use any color for your clouds, I think are amazing, even doing some rainbow clouds. I went with just a light blue, the tumbled glass, because I plan on adding a rainbow to the front of my shaker, so I didn't want to overdo all of the rainbow colors. As I'm blending up towards that previous cloud, I'm also leaving just a little bit of white, so my blue is fading off into the white. Then after my last cloud is done, I'm going to take my blending tool and just add a little bit of color to the very bottom. So now that my background is ready, I am going to take the Stitched Tall Rainbow die, and I am going to die cut this out of just a rainbow of colors that I have in my collection. Any type of cardstock, scratch cardstock, anything you have left over would work for this. So when I die cut these, I did save one of those and I'm going to use it as a template. I have another piece of white cardstock here, and this is just another 80-pound. You could also use copy paper. And I'm tracing this, uh, what is it, the negative space onto that white cardstock. This is going to serve as a base. I'm going to end up attaching my rainbows to this, and it's just easier for me to work with the rainbow when I have this base to kind of move my rainbow around. So I just went ahead and trimmed along those pencil lines, and then I added tape runner to the entire front of this. Now that I have that whole thing covered with tape, or you could use liquid glue, I'm going to start bringing in my different rays of the rainbow, starting with the purple. Now, the reason I started with the inside of the rainbow is that it's easier for me to trim off any excess that might be overhanging. It's easier to trim it from the outside edge than it is that inside edge. Using my tweezers, I'm going to just pick up each ray of the rainbow, kind of going through. You can see my assortment up on the top and placing those down, making sure to butt them up right next to each other so I don't have any white gaps in between. I like to use my tweezers to do this, mainly because then it keeps my hands out of the way and I can really see where it's lining up. Now, with a dot runner, I like to use that instead of liquid glue because I feel like I have just a little bit more wiggle room. So if I end up being a little off, I can come back in, pick it up, and readjust it as needed. After I finish attaching my pink one, you're going to see I have a little bit of a white edge at the very top. So I'm going to come in with my scissors and just try and carefully trim that off without cutting that last rainbow. I could definitely be making a ton more cards, but instead for right now, I'm taking all of those extra pieces and just putting them in a storage pocket to save for later. To create our infinity shaker, I have a piece of leftover packaging from a stamp set or die set, anything like that that's pretty clear and doesn't have any sticky stuff on it. I'm going to start by just trimming off that top piece. So now I have an open end at the top and the bottom. I'm going to come in and I'm going to trim off the very edges on each side so that I end up with two pieces. And I'm trimming this down to be slightly larger than my card front. Now, I actually went a little bit too small. This ended up trimming out to 4 3/4 by 6 inches, which only left me 1/4 of an inch on each side. I'm going to go ahead and just use that size, but I do suggest going a little bit bigger to give yourself a little more wiggle room. I tried to place this on some colored cardstock, hoping you could see it better, but I don't, with packaging, it's so hard to see on camera. So I have that placed over to make sure it's lined up. And then I'm taking this 1/8 inch, I believe it is, of double-sided tape, and I am lining the very edges of the back of my ink blended panel where I did the clouds. Now, mine, I had to go right to the very edge because, like I said, I left myself a very little wiggle room. After I have all of my edges covered, I'm lining up that panel. Now this is face down on that packaging, and I'm trimming off these corners kind of at an angle. What this is going to do is when we fold this over, it's going to make the back of our panel really nice and flat. I'm going to give you a close-up look here in just a minute so you can see what I mean by the angles because like I said, once again, I know it's really hard to see this on camera. So here I'm just going to show you I'm kind of tilting it, and there is that angled edge. So now we can place this back down on our work surface. Once again, I have the packaging on the bottom, then my cloud panel face down, and I'm going to just do 3 sides right now. I'm removing the backing of that double-sided tape and folding each edge over. Now, if you fold it really tight, you're not going to leave yourself a lot of room for your shaker bits to move around. Mine is super tight mainly because I didn't give myself that little bit of leeway, but we want to make sure to leave one end open so that we can add our shaker bits in there. I'll hold this up close to the camera once again so that you can see what I meant by trimming off those corners. Everything is still connected. It's going to hold our shaker pieces in there, but it's really nice and flat, so it's going to attach to a card base really nice. Now we can start bringing in some shaker pieces, and really you can use whatever you want, but I do suggest something on the little bit of a flatter side. Like these confetti pieces are really good because they are flat. This isn't a rainbow assortment that I have in my stash, so I'm just scooping some up and I'm placing them inside that open end that we left. Now, honestly, after I kind of went back and looked at the card, I kind of wish I wouldn't have added them. I wish I would have just left with these stars. These are some I've had in my collection, and I use them all the time in shaker cards. They're very small, very flat, and they just go with everything. So once I have all of my shaker pieces in there, I can then flip this over, make sure it's kind of spread out a little bit, and then I can remove the backing of that double-sided tape and fold it over. So that finishes or completes the actual shaker portion of the card. I'm going to start working on a sentiment for the front of the card, and the sentiment is coming from the Rainbow Critters stamp set. I love the sentiments on here. I think they're so versatile. So I lined it up on some black cardstock. I'm prepping that with an anti-static powder tool. I'm going to ink up my sentiment with some white pigment ink, and once I gently stamp that down, I'm going to sprinkle on some white embossing powder, tap off my excess back into my container, and then after my heat tool is really nice and hot, I can bring it over and melt that embossing powder. Once I give it a few seconds to cool off, I'm going to wipe over it with a Swiffer cloth just to buff off any excess powder. I have a card base. It's a side folding card base that I created, and I'm going to attach my shaker panel to the front of that using some double-sided tape just to make sure it's really adhered to the front of that cardstock. After I remove the backing, I can line this up and make sure that you have your panel facing in the right direction so that my clouds aren't upside down. Line up my edges and then push that down to have it fully secured to the front of the card. Now, my rainbow I'm having go on the front of my shaker card. And the reason I did that is I didn't want all of my sequins and shaker pieces to get stuck to the rainbow. So I'm attaching it using that double-sided tape once again. Then after I have that covered, I can remove the backing and place this on the front of the card. I'm going to have it kind of centered, so I just want to make sure that I'm having even margins on each side of my rainbow. Now my sentiment, I did trim down into a smaller strip. I just did that off screen with my mini paper trimmer. I'm going to put some black foam squares on the back of that, and then I'm going to place this on the front of the card, once again, kind of centering that as best as I can, just eyeballing it, but you could use a T-square ruler too if that helps. And then that finishes off our infinity shaker. So here I'm trying to give it a shake. It doesn't move a lot, but like I said, that was mainly because I secured everything so snug around the edge of the card. But I love it. I think it still came out really super cute, and I love the clouds in the background. I hope you enjoyed today's card project. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you again soon.